August 10th, 2018. The morning the music stopped on the British High Street. Panic swept through shop floors as staff were locked out of their tills and delivery lorries turned around in loading bays. House of Fraser, a 169-year-old retail institution, had collapsed into administration. At its zenith, this was the undisputed aristocrat of British retail, an empire of more than 60 premium department stores stretching from Glasgow to London. It was the ultimate destination for weekend shopping trips, dazzling Christmas window displays, and the scent of expensive perfume wafting through opulent beauty halls. It brought up beloved regional icons, Army and Navy, Dickins and Jones, Jenners, absorbing them into a luxury powerhouse. But the velvet ropes would inevitably fall. Lavish shop floors emptied out. Heritage buildings that once anchored bustling town centres became hollow, aging shells, hastily sold off to the highest bidder for a fraction of their former glory. How does a dynasty with over a century and a half of history plummet from high street royalty to the bargain bin of administration? It wasn't just the sudden rise of internet retail, it was a slow poison of suffocating leases, private equity merry-go-rounds, and a catastrophic failure to understand the modern consumer. The story of Britain's most aristocratic department store does not begin in the wealthy, polished enclaves of London's West End. It begins in the soot-stained, thumping heart of the Industrial Revolution, Glasgow, in the year 1849. Mid-19th century Scotland was a landscape defined by heavy industry, shipbuilding, and a rapidly expanding economy. The River Clyde was a global artery of trade, choking with ships and thick with the smoke of progress. But where there was industry, there was unprecedented wealth. And where there was sudden wealth, there was a ravenous appetite for refinement, status, and luxury. Into this bustling, grey metropolis stepped two men, James Arthur and Hugh Fraser. Recognizing the shifting tides of the local economy, they opened a modest drapery business on the corner of Argyle Street and Buchanan Street. At its inception, Arthur and Fraser was not an empire. It was merely a shop. It was a place to buy high-quality fabrics, ribbons, and the heavy woolens necessary to endure a bitter Scottish winter. By all accounts, it was a standard retail operation of the era. Yet, Hugh Fraser possessed an acute understanding of a fundamental psychological shift occurring in Victorian society. A new social stratum was emerging across Britain. The rising middle classes, the wealthy merchants, the factory managers, the industrial professionals, now possessed disposable income. More importantly, they possessed aspirations. They did not just want sturdy clothing, they wanted high fashion. They did not just want a simple transactions over a wooden counter, they wanted an experience that validated their newly acquired social standing. Before this era, retail was a strictly utilitarian affair. A customer walked into a shop, asked the proprietor for a specific item, paid for it, and left. There was no browsing, no lingering, and certainly no visual spectacle. Hugh Fraser helped change that behavior in Glasgow. He transformed the humble drapery into a destination of desire. He insisted on sourcing the finest silks, delicate laces, and imported textiles, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity that was previously reserved only for the titled nobility. He understood that shopping was slowly evolving from a mere domestic chore into a highly respectable leisure activity, particularly for wealthy Victorian women who were largely excluded from other public spheres. The shop floor was designed to be a safe, opulent environment where ladies could socialize, wander, and admire. It became a theater of aspiration. The physical space of the shop evolved to reflect this. Gas lamps illuminated gleaming mahogany counters, and vast glass display cabinets showcased items not just as goods for sale, but as objects of beauty. The customer service was meticulously choreographed to reinforce this illusion of grandeur. Shop assistants were rigorously trained to be deferential, knowledgeable, and impeccably presented. They were the custodians of the brand's prestige. To cross the threshold of Arthur and Fraser was to step out of the grimy, chaotic reality of industrial Glasgow and into a meticulously curated world of luxury. It was an escape. It was a daily affirmation of success. By the time the initial partnership was dissolved and the business formally became Fraser and Sons under the leadership of Hugh Fraser II, The blueprint for a retail dynasty had been firmly drawn. The single shop expanded aggressively into neighboring buildings, swallowing up adjacent premises to create a sprawling, multi-tiered emporium. This was the dawn of the true department store concept in Scotland. It was a revolutionary and highly ambitious idea, housing under one magnificent roof absolutely everything a prosperous household could possibly desire, from bespoke tailoring and haberdashery to imported homewares and luxury cosmetics. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the foundations of the House of Fraser were set deep into the Scottish bedrock. It had established a formula that would prove incredibly lucrative. They were not merely selling premium goods, they were selling the premium lifestyle itself. The local Glasgow draper had successfully elevated itself into a retail sovereign within its home city. It had captured the loyalty of the affluent and the aspirations of the working classes. But the ambitions of the Fraser family, soon to be led by the formidable Hugh Fraser III, extended far beyond the Scottish borders. The foundation of luxury had been perfected in Glasgow, but the high streets of Britain were waiting, and the aristocratic march of this retail giant was only just beginning. After consolidating its power as a retail sovereign in Scotland, the mid-20th century brought a new and ruthlessly ambitious visionary to the helm, Hugh Fraser III, later elevated to the peerage as Lord Fraser of Allender. He looked beyond the familiar banks of the River Clyde and saw a British retail landscape ripe for conquest. Building a national footprint brick by brick, town by town, was the slow, methodical work of generations. But Fraser was a man in a hurry. He understood a fundamental and brutal truth of modern commerce. Why spend decades building an empire when you can simply buy one? The post-war British high street was a patchwork of fiercely independent, family-run department stores. Almost every major provincial town and city had its own local aristocrat of retail, a grand multi-story emporium that had served the local bourgeoisie for generations. However, the economic reality of the 1950s was beginning to bite. Many of these historic family businesses were struggling with succession planning, burdened by the death duties of the era, or simply lacked the immense capital required to modernize their aging premises. They were vulnerable, and Lord Fraser moved with the precision of an apex predator. Throughout the 1950s, 1960s, and into the 1970s, House of Fraser embarked on one of the most aggressive and spectacular acquisition sprees in the history of the British High Street. The strategy was as brilliant as it was deceptive. When House of Fraser bought a beloved regional store, they did not arrive with wrecking balls and new signage. They rarely slapped the House of Fraser name above the grand entrance doors. Fraser understood that local loyalty was the ultimate currency in retail. A shopper in Birmingham did not want to buy her perfume from a Glasgow-based conglomerate. She wanted to buy it from Rackham's. And so the acquisitions rolled in, retaining their historic identities while quietly funneling their profits back to the Scottish mothership. The group swooped down on the West Country to purchase Dingles. Across the Midlands, they absorbed the beloved Beattie's chain, a brand synonymous with excellent customer service and afternoon tea. In London, the conquests were even more glamorous. They bought Barker's of Kensington, retaining its affluent, conservative clientele. They acquired Dickins Jones, a sparkling jewel of the West End. They swallowed up the Army and Navy stores in Victoria, a historic institution originally founded in the 19th century to supply British military officers and their families with everything from tropical uniforms to fine wines. And eventually, they would take control of Jenner's in Edinburgh, the venerable Harrods of the North, a high society establishment so grand it held a royal warrant. But the ultimate prize, the conquest that cemented Lord Fraser's status as a titan of British industry, came in 1959. Following a bitter, highly publicized, and protracted takeover battle against rival retail tycoons, House of Fraser successfully acquired Harrods of Knightsbridge. It was a seismic shockwave that rippled through the British establishment. A provincial drapery business from Glasgow had travelled south, outmaneuvered the London elite, and captured the most famous, most luxurious shop in the world. For over 2 decades, Harrods sat within the House of Fraser portfolio, an unparalleled trophy that elevated the entire group's status. House of Fraser was no longer just a successful business, it was the undisputed monarch of premium retail. By the late 20th century, the empire was vast, sprawling, and seemingly invincible. House of Fraser had become a colossal holding company, operating over 60 department stores under dozens of different historic brand names across the United Kingdom. It was the largest department store group in Europe. To the public, these shops remained their cherished local institutions, the places they bought their school uniforms, their wedding dresses, and their Christmas gifts. But behind the scenes, a powerful, centralized machine dictated the buying, the staffing, and the strategy. Yet, in this relentless, decades-long pursuit of scale, the seeds of future ruin were quietly and deeply sown. By buying up so many disparate historic businesses, House of Fraser had constructed a Frankenstein's monster of an empire. It was not a single, streamlined company built from the ground up. It was a fragmented patchwork. They had inherited a sprawling estate of highly idiosyncratic, structurally complex heritage buildings, Victorian and Edwardian palaces of commerce with grand staircases, listed facades, and a constant, draining need for expensive, bespoke maintenance. They inherited dozens of different corporate cultures, incompatible back-office systems, and highly unionized local workforces. It was a disjointed network masquerading as a unified business. As long as the high street remained the undisputed king of shopping, and as long as the cash registers kept ringing, the cracks in the masonry could be safely ignored. But the empire had grown unimaginably heavy. It was bureaucratic, slow to turn, and weighed down by the very history it had so eagerly purchased. House of Fraser had built an impregnable fortress of brick, mortar, and local heritage, entirely unaware that the nature of the retail war was about to change forever. To understand what was ultimately lost, one must first step back into the late 1980s and 1990s, the undisputed golden age of the British department store, before the algorithms, before next-day delivery vans clogged the streets, and before the sterile, lonely glow of a smartphone screen dictated consumer habits. Shopping was a deeply physical, sensory, and social event. And at the apex of this cultural experience sat House of Fraser. By this time, the group had begun to gradually unify its sprawling portfolio under the iconic House of Fraser banner, though regional loyalty remained fiercely protected in certain historic locations. Walking through the heavy glass doors of a House of Fraser store, whether it was standing proudly on a bustling provincial high street or anchoring a newly built, multi-million-pound shopping centre, was a meticulously crafted theatrical experience. The performance began immediately on the ground floor. The beauty hall was the glittering, fragrant heart of the empire. Shoppers were greeted by a sudden blast of warm air and a dizzying symphony of expensive scents. Gleaming counters of marble, brass, and glass stretched as far as the eye could see, manned by immaculately groomed staff in pristine uniforms, representing the global titans of cosmetics: Chanel, Dior, Estée Lauder, and Clinique. Shoppers did not just come here to buy a bottle of perfume. They came for the ritual. They came to sit on high stools, to be pampered, to have makeup expertly applied, and to carry home a heavy, glossy paper bag that served as a visible badge of premium status on the journey back to the car park. Moving up the escalators, the experience only deepened. House of Fraser had mastered the art of the concession model, transforming its vast floor space into a curated gallery of aspirational brands. It was the destination where a young professional bought their first serious tailored suit for a corporate job interview. It was the trusted sanctuary for the mother of the bride to find the perfect hat and matching shoes. The service was deferential, but never intimidating. Shop assistants were career professionals who knew their regular customers by name, who understood the intricate sizing of designer labels, and who possessed the quiet authority to guide a shopper toward a purchase that felt like an investment rather than a fleeting indulgence. This sense of occasion reached its absolute zenith during the festive season. For millions of British families, the countdown to the holidays did not officially begin until the local House of Fraser unveiled its Christmas windows. These were not mere product displays. They were mechanical, glittering, theatrical works of art. that drew mesmerized crowds on the freezing pavements outside. Inside, the store was transformed into a winter wonderland. Children queued for hours to visit the impeccably decorated grottos, while parents navigated the bustling toy departments and homeware aisles, crossing off long lists of gifts to the faint sound of Christmas carols playing over the public address system. Crucially, House of Fraser was not just a place to spend money, it was a place to dwell. The in-store cafes and top-floor restaurants, with their silver teapots, clinking china, and towering displays of scones, sandwiches, and cakes, were local institutions in their own right. Generations of families spent their Saturday afternoons resting weary feet, dissecting the day's purchases over a pot of Earl Grey. The department store was a self-contained ecosystem designed to keep the customer comfortably enclosed within its walls for hours on end. During this golden era, House of Fraser became the ultimate anchor tenant. When local councils and property developers designed vast new shopping centres on the edge of towns or in regenerated city centres, securing House of Fraser was the ultimate prize. Their massive, multi-storey presence guaranteed prestige, guaranteed footfall, and instantly elevated the status of any retail development. The logistics of running these colossal physical spaces was staggering. Behind the polished shop floor lay a hidden labyrinth of stockrooms, loading bays, staff canteens, and administrative offices, operating with the unseen precision of a small city. The tills rang relentlessly. The queues at the checkout stretched through the aisles on Boxing Day. The financial returns were staggering, and the empire felt completely unassailable. Why wouldn't it? They had perfected a model of premium physical retail that had worked flawlessly for over a century. They possessed the best locations, the finest brands, and the most loyal, affluent customer base in the country. Yet, the very elements that made this golden age so magnificent were already hardening into a trap. House of Fraser had built an empire predicated entirely on the physical presence of the shopper. It required the customer to travel, to park, to browse, and to carry their goods home. It relied on an enormous, highly trained workforce and vast palaces of prime real estate to maintain its illusion of luxury. In the boardrooms, bathed in the warm glow of record profits, there was a fatal assumption that this era of dominance would last forever. They could not hear the faint, distant hum of dial-up modems. They could not foresee that the sprawling, multi-story physical footprint, their greatest and most celebrated asset, was about to become a devastating anchor, dragging them into the abyss. The golden age of the premium department store was radiating its brightest, most spectacular light, entirely unaware that it was already a dying star. As the 20th century rolled into the 21st, the British retail landscape appeared entirely normal to the untrained eye. The shopping centres were still crowded, the tills were still ringing, and House of Fraser still commanded prime positions on high streets across the United Kingdom. But beneath the polished veneer of the beauty halls and the carefully curated fashion floors, the tectonic plates of global commerce were beginning to shift. A slow, invisible pressure was building, one that would soon crack the very foundations of the department store model. The greatest weapon House of Fraser possessed had always been its physical footprint. For over a century, dominating vast tracts of premium real estate was the ultimate barrier to entry. Rivals could not easily replicate a 6-story Victorian retail palace in the centre of Birmingham or Glasgow. However, the nature of British commercial property law meant that this sprawling empire of brick and mortar was secretly a ticking time bomb. Historically, UK retail leases were uniquely punishing. During periods of rapid expansion, retail chains often signed draconian 25-year leases containing upward-only rent reviews. This meant that every few years, regardless of the economic climate, regardless of falling footfall, and regardless of the store's actual profitability, the rent could only ever stay the same or go up. It could never go down. Institutional landlords, pension funds and property conglomerates viewed House of Fraser as a blue-chip tenant, a reliable cash cow that would dutifully pay astronomical rents for decades to come. Compounding this suffocating financial pressure was the uniquely British system of business rates. Essentially, a property tax based on the theoretical rental value of a commercial premises. Business rates penalized the very thing House of Fraser had built its empire upon: massive physical space. The department store model required hundreds of thousands of square feet. It required vast stockrooms, spacious walkways, sweeping escalators, and lavish restaurants. Every single square foot, whether it was actively selling high-margin cosmetics or merely serving as an empty corridor near the customer toilets, incurred a heavy tax burden. Maintaining this estate was a colossal, never-ending drain on capital. The historic, listed buildings that Lord Fraser had so eagerly bought up in the mid-20th century were majestic, but they were also aging rapidly. They required bespoke maintenance, modernized heating systems, updated fire safety compliance, and constant aesthetic refurbishment to maintain the illusion of premium luxury. The fixed costs of merely opening the heavy glass doors each morning, rent, rates, heating, lighting, and a vast army of floor staff, were staggering. The business had to turn over millions of pounds just to stand still. While the fixed costs of physical retail were spiraling upwards, a quiet revolution was happening in the spare bedrooms and home offices of Britain. The internet, initially dismissed by many retail executives as a niche novelty or a slow, clunky digital catalogue, was rapidly maturing. Dial-up modems gave way to broadband. Cumbersome websites evolved into slick, user-friendly e-commerce platforms. Suddenly, the fundamental proposition of the department store, the convenience of having everything under one roof, was rendered entirely obsolete. The internet offered everything under the sun, accessible from the sofa, without the need to battle for a space in a multi-story car park or queue at the tills. For a premium retailer like House of Fraser, this digital shift created a devastating new consumer behavior: showrooming. The department store, with its beautiful lighting, expert staff, and tactile environment, was unwittingly transformed into a free, interactive display cabinet for online competitors. A shopper could walk into House of Fraser, spend an hour receiving advice from a trained cosmetics assistant, test the shade of a premium foundation, try on a designer winter coat to check the sizing, and then politely leave. Later that evening, from the comfort of their own home, they would purchase those exact same items online from a digital-only retailer or directly from the brand itself, often at a substantial discount. The economics were terrifyingly simple. An online retailer operated out of a vast, unglamorous shed on a retail park adjacent to a motorway in the Midlands. They paid a fraction of the rent, negligible business rates, and required minimal staff. They did not need to build elaborate window displays or polish marble floors. Consequently, they could ruthlessly undercut the high street on price while offering next-day delivery. Inside the boardrooms of legacy retailers, the response to this existential threat was lethargic. Operating a massive chain of physical shops requires a specific type of management culture, one focused on logistics, visual merchandising, and incremental year-on-year sales growth. Transitioning into an agile digital technology company was entirely alien to the established corporate DNA. For years, e-commerce was treated not as the core of the future business, but merely as an ancillary department, an irritating distraction that diverted investment away from the beloved shop floors. House of Fraser found itself trapped in a structural paradox. To compete with the internet, they desperately needed to invest tens of millions of pounds into digital infrastructure, logistics networks, and website development. But every spare pound of profit was being relentlessly swallowed by the insatiable demands of the physical estate, the upward-only rents, the crippling business rates, and the never-ending maintenance of aging buildings. The empire was frozen, weighed down by its own history, watching helplessly as the digital tide began to wash over the high street. The golden goose of brick-and-mortar retail was choking on its own golden eggs. But the true agony of House of Fraser was about to be accelerated not just by the internet, but by the ruthless financial engineering of its new masters. While the dual threats of the internet and suffocating leases were relentlessly squeezing the life out of the department store model, the true fatal blow to House of Fraser did not come from a rival shop or a digital competitor. It came from the boardroom. As the new millennium progressed, the retail giant ceased to be run by merchants who loved shop floors and became the plaything of financiers who loved spreadsheets. The fate of a beloved British institution was no longer decided by the needs of the customer, but by the ruthless logic of private equity. In 2006, after a period as a publicly listed company, House of Fraser was acquired by the Highland Group, a consortium heavily backed by Bauga, an aggressive Icelandic retail investment vehicle. This marked the beginning of a dark, complex era of financial engineering. The acquisition was a classic leveraged buyout. In simple terms, the investors did not buy the company using only their own money. They bought it by loading the House of Fraser itself with an enormous mountain of debt. Overnight, the fundamental purpose of the business changed. The priority was no longer long-term investment in customer experience or modernizing the stores to fight off the digital threat. The sole priority was generating enough cash to service the astronomical interest payments on the debt used to purchase the company. It was a parasitic relationship. The corporate entity was slowly bleeding the retail operation dry. When the global financial crisis struck in 2008, the Icelandic banking system spectacularly collapsed, taking Baugur down with it. House of Fraser survived the immediate fallout, but it was left severely weakened, deeply indebted, and utterly starved of capital. To the shoppers browsing the beauty halls, the ownership structures were invisible, but the consequences were becoming impossible to ignore. A department store requires constant, heavy investment to maintain its premium aura. When that investment is choked off, the decay sets in quickly. Carpets begin to fray. Escalators break down and remain out of service for weeks. Lighting fixtures grow dim, and the once impeccable paintwork begins to peel. The stores were gradually losing their magic, but the merry-go-round of ownership was far from over. In 2014, a new savior seemingly arrived from the east. Sanpower, a vast Chinese conglomerate led by billionaire Yuan Yafei, purchased an 89% stake in House of Fraser in a deal that valued the business at hundreds of millions of pounds. At the time, it was heralded as the dawn of a magnificent new era. The new owners arrived with dizzying promises. They spoke of injecting millions into the neglected UK physical estate. They outlined grand visions of expanding the brand into Asia, boasting that they would open 50 House of Fraser stores across China, creating an Oriental Harrods. For a brief, fleeting moment, the beleaguered staff on the British High Street dared to hope that the years of austerity were over, but the grand promises evaporated almost as quickly as they were made. The massive cash injections required to fix the crumbling British stores never materialized. The ambitious expansion into China stalled. Instead of stability, the Sanpower era brought unparalleled boardroom chaos. Chief executives and senior directors came and went through a revolving door, unable to reconcile the demands of the Chinese ownership with the grim reality of the UK retail market. There was a profound, fatal disconnect between the executive suites in Nanjing and the damp, drafty shop floors in places like Birmingham, Cardiff, and Glasgow. The new owners fundamentally misunderstood the delicate nuances of British heritage retail. They did not grasp that you cannot slash staffing levels and underinvest in store maintenance while simultaneously charging premium prices for luxury goods. The customer will simply notice the decline and walk away. Worse still, while the physical stores were quite literally falling apart, the corporate structure allowed millions of pounds to be extracted in dividends and complex management fees. It was a masterclass in value extraction. While shop assistants were forced to apologize to furious customers for leaking roofs and broken card machines, the corporate entity was being hollowed out from the inside. House of Fraser had been reduced to a poker chip, traded across international borders by men who had never walked its aisles on a busy Saturday afternoon, who had never bought a school uniform from its concessions, and who had no emotional connection to the brand's 169-year history. They were extracting the final drops of prestige from the aristocratic name, leaving behind a heavily indebted, structurally flawed business that was entirely unequipped to survive the incoming storm. The high street was emptying, and House of Fraser was suddenly standing very alone. By the mid-2000s, the grim reality of the boardroom machinations had bled unmistakably onto the shop floor. The British High Street was undergoing a brutal, irreversible transformation. Footfall, the absolute lifeblood of any physical retailer, was falling at an alarming rate across the country. The cultural habit of the Saturday shopping trip was fracturing. Shoppers were increasingly bypassing congested town centres, favouring the convenience of out-of-town retail parks with their vast, free car parks, or simply remaining on their sofas, seduced by the frictionless ease of next-day delivery. For House of Fraser, this macroeconomic shift exposed the devastating, visible consequences of chronic underinvestment. A premium department store relies implicitly on the theatre of retail. It must look, feel, and smell aspirational. It is an environment that justifies a higher price tag through an elevated experience. But stepping into a House of Fraser during this decade often felt like stepping into a forgotten era, and not in a charming, nostalgic sense. The decay was visceral and deeply depressing. The sprawling Victorian and Edwardian buildings, once the pride of the portfolio, had become mouldering liabilities. Customers walked past buckets, catching rainwater from leaking roofs in the homeware departments. They navigated around out-of-order escalators that remained static for weeks on end. The lighting, once carefully calibrated to make cosmetics sparkle and silk dresses shine, was often reduced to flickering, harsh fluorescent tubes, casting a pallid, gloomy atmosphere over the merchandise. The carpets were threadbare, the changing rooms felt neglected, and the sheer volume of empty, dead space within these colossal buildings became painfully obvious. You cannot sell a premium lifestyle in a discount environment. The customer's journey felt fundamentally cheapened. The highly trained, career-driven shop assistants of the Golden Age had largely been replaced by a skeleton crew of demoralized minimum-wage staff, stretched far too thinly across vast expanses of the shop floor. They were fighting a losing battle against the crumbling infrastructure, entirely unable to deliver the bespoke, deferential service that had once defined the brand. The magic had evaporated, leaving behind only the exhausting reality of a failing shop. The most fatal symptom of this decline, however, was the collapse of the concession model. For decades, House of Fraser's greatest strength was its ability to curate a dazzling array of the world's most desirable brands under one roof. It was a symbiotic relationship. House of Fraser provided the premium footfall and the aristocratic setting, and the luxury brands provided the exclusivity and the revenue. But luxury fashion and premium cosmetics houses are notoriously ruthlessly protective of their brand equity. They dictate the exact lighting, the precise shelving, and the overall aesthetic of their retail environments. When the wider House of Fraser stores began to rot, these brands panicked. They looked around at the peeling paint, the empty aisles, and the desperate, permanent sale banners plastered across the windows, and they realized that being associated with this decaying empire was actively damaging their own prestige. Slowly, quietly, the exodus began. Premium brands began refusing to renew their concession agreements, packing up their glossy counters and retreating to standalone boutiques or rival, healthier department stores like John Lewis or Selfridges. This triggered a catastrophic death spiral. As the desirable brands left, footfall plummeted even further. As footfall plummeted, more brands decided to leave. To mask the gaping, humiliating holes appearing across the shop floor, management resorted to desperate measures. They began panic-filling the empty space with lower-tier, fast fashion labels and a confusing array of cheap, in-house brands. The curated, aspirational gallery was replaced by cluttered, disorganized rails of deeply discounted stock. House of Fraser was unwittingly transforming itself from an aristocratic department store into a cavernous, confusing jumble sale. The identity crisis was absolute. The loyal, affluent customer base, the multi-generational shoppers who had sustained the empire for decades, who had come here for their wedding registry, their premium skincare, and their tailored suits, walked through the heavy glass doors, failed entirely to recognize the proud institution they had once loved, and quietly walked out. They took their loyalty and their money elsewhere. House of Fraser was left stranded in the most dangerous territory in British retail, the squeezed middle. It was no longer luxurious enough to compete with Harrods or Selfridges, yet it was far too expensive and cumbersome to compete with fast fashion chains or the ruthless efficiency of online retail. The empire had lost its purpose, its audience, and its dignity. The high street outside was emptying, but inside the store, the silence was deafening. It was only a matter of time before the financial dam finally broke. By the spring of 2018, the whispers of financial distress surrounding House of Fraser had escalated from quiet industry rumors into a deafening, unavoidable klaxon. The business was bleeding cash at an entirely unsustainable rate, suffocated by its colossal rent bill and plummeting high street footfall. In a desperate 11th hour bid for survival, the boardroom executives proposed a company voluntary arrangement, or CVA. This is a controversial insolvency procedure frequently used by struggling British retailers to aggressively shed unprofitable leases and force landlords into accepting drastic rent reductions. The proposed CVA was a brutal, merciless surgical procedure. It laid out a plan to permanently shutter 31 of the 59 remaining physical stores, including the flagship Oxford Street branch in London. Thousands of staff were told their livelihoods would be sacrificed. It was a humiliating public admission of the empire's failure, effectively halving the 169-year-old dynasty overnight. Yet management pitched it as the only viable medicine to save the core business from total annihilation. To fund this massive restructuring program, Sanpower had arranged a complex £70 million financial lifeline from Banner, the Chinese conglomerate that then owned the toy retailer Hamleys. The survival of House of Fraser hung entirely on this single precarious thread. For the staff on the shop floors across the United Kingdom, the summer of 2018 was an agonizing purgatory. They were forced to stand behind their tills, smiling at the dwindling number of customers, while knowing their workplace was effectively on death row. Suppliers, acutely aware of the perilous financial situation, began refusing to deliver new stock on credit. The shelves grew painfully bare. The beauty halls, once a glittering maze of premium products, began to display obvious, embarrassing gaps. The illusion of luxury had completely shattered. Then, the final, fatal blow landed. The landlords, furious at being strong-armed into accepting massive financial losses while the overseas owners walked away, relatively unscathed, mounted legal challenges against the CVA. Spooked by this escalating legal turmoil and the rapidly deteriorating trading conditions across the British retail sector, Banner abruptly pulled out of the deal in the first week of August. The £70 million lifeline vanished into thin air. The boardroom was out of manoeuvres. House of Fraser had run out of time, run out of road, and most crucially, run out of money. Friday, August 10th, 2018. The shockwave hit the pavement before the heavy glass doors even opened to the public. Across the country, thousands of retail workers arrived in the early morning light for their shifts, expecting another exhausting day of managing frustrated customers and empty rails. Instead, they found the mechanics of the business completely frozen. The House of Fraser website was abruptly taken offline, replaced by a blank digital screen citing vague maintenance. At the loading bays, tucked behind the grand Victorian facades, delivery drivers for major cosmetics and fashion brands were frantically ordered by their head offices to turn their lorries around. Not a single box of new stock was to cross the threshold of an insolvent company. On the shop floor, a scene of quiet, surreal panic unfolded. The electronic tills were locked. Concession staff, who technically worked for the independent luxury brands rather than House of Fraser itself, received urgent phone calls from their area managers, instructing them to immediately start packing up their expensive merchandise into cardboard boxes to protect it from being seized by liquidators. By mid-morning, the inevitable statement was transmitted to the City of London, and the news flashed across morning television programs nationwide. House of Fraser had formally collapsed into administration. The accountancy firm Ernst & Young was appointed to take control of the wreckage. The sheer scale of the financial gravity was staggering. The business owed tens of millions of pounds to suppliers, trade creditors, landlords, and the taxman. But the human cost was the true tragedy. 17,000 jobs, a complex mix of direct House of Fraser employees and concession staff, were suddenly dangling over the abyss. Staff who had dedicated decades of their working lives to the company, who knew their local customers by name, and who had viewed their jobs as careers rather than mere retail shifts, were left staring at a void, uncertain if they would even receive their final wage packet. It was one of the largest and most spectacular retail collapses in modern British history. The majestic department store group that Hugh Fraser had meticulously built from a single drapery shop in Glasgow, the aggressive predator that had once conquered the high street and briefly swallowed Harrods, had effectively died in the space of a single summer morning. The empire was in ruins, but the carcass of the business was far too large, and the brand name far too famous, to simply be swept away into history without a fight. By the end of that very same day, a controversial new owner would emerge from the shadows, checkbook in hand. Before the dust had even settled on the morning of August 10th, 2018, a shockwave of an entirely different nature ripped through the British retail industry. The administration of House of Fraser had lasted mere hours. By the end of that very same Friday, it was announced that the business, its brand, and its remaining assets had been bought out of administration for exactly £90 million in cash. The buyer was Mike Ashley, the maverick billionaire founder of the Sports Direct empire. To the retail establishment, it was a collision of two entirely incompatible universes. House of Fraser was the historic, albeit faded, aristocrat of the high street, a realm of bespoke tailoring, premium cosmetics, and hushed, carpeted aisles. Mike Ashley, conversely, had built a phenomenally successful retail juggernaut based on a philosophy of stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap. His stores were synonymous with discount tracksuits, giant promotional mugs, and chaotic, densely packed shop floors. The idea that the king of the bargain bin had just purchased the keys to the beauty hall was dizzying. Yet, Ashley arrived with a bold, almost unbelievable declaration. He famously promised to inject life back into the decaying portfolio, boldly stating his ambition to transform House of Fraser into the Harrods of the high street. For the thousands of terrified staff who had spent the morning assuming they were destined for the dole queue, this grand proclamation offered a sudden, intoxicating flash of hope. The jobs were ostensibly saved. The brand would live on. However, the reality of the £90 million rescue was not a benevolent preservation of a historic charity. It was a masterpiece of ruthless corporate triage. Ashley had purchased House of Fraser through a highly controversial legal mechanism known as a pre-pack administration. This meant that for his £90 million, he acquired the brand name, the physical stock, and the trading assets, but he legally left behind the crippling mountain of debt. The millions owed to suppliers, the pension deficits, and, crucially, the astronomical rent arrears owed to landlords were wiped out or left to the liquidators to fight over. He had essentially bought a pristine, empty shell of a company. Having shed the historical debt, Ashley immediately went to war with the landlords. His negotiating tactic was entirely devoid of sentimentality. He understood that a massive, multi-story department store is a white elephant in the modern property market. If House of Fraser vacated the premises, the landlord would be left with an enormous, unlettable building and a colossal liability for business rates. Ashley held all the cards, and he played them brutally. He demanded that landlords accept radical, unprecedented rent reductions, often demanding rent-free periods or moving to turnover-based rents, where he would only pay a percentage of the store's actual sales. It was an ultimatum: accept the new, drastically reduced terms, or he would simply hand the keys back and walk away, leaving an echoing void in the center of their shopping centers. A fierce, highly publicized game of high street poker ensued. In some towns, landlords eventually capitulated, accepting pennies in the pound just to keep the lights on and the buildings occupied. But in many other historic locations, the negotiations collapsed in mutual fury. Iconic stores that had served their local communities for generations, stores that had survived world wars, recessions, and the rise of the internet, were unceremoniously shuttered. The heavy doors were padlocked, the grand windows were whitewashed, and the staff were finally let go. The £90 million rescue had indeed kept the House of Fraser name alive on the British high street, but it was a survival bought at a terrible, uncompromising cost. The empire had been saved from total annihilation, but as the new management began to move into the remaining stores, the loyal customers were about to discover that the aristocratic institution they once loved was about to be transformed into something entirely unrecognizable. To the casual observer walking through a British town centre, the famous House of Fraser signage often remained bolted above the grand entrance doors. The brand had technically survived, but stepping inside revealed a disorientating and deeply melancholic reality. The bold promise to create the Harrods of the High Street quickly dissolved into a confusing, chaotic retail experiment. The aristocratic department store was being hollowed out, replaced by a hybrid beast that loyal shoppers entirely failed to understand. The most jarring physical change occurred on the shop floor itself. Where there were once meticulously arranged displays of tailored suits, premium homewares, and hushed beauty counters, vast sections of the stores were abruptly handed over to the new parent company's core business. Racks of discounted Lonsdale tracksuits, giant Schlesinger tennis rackets, and towering walls of affordable trainers from Sports Direct began to encroach upon the fading grandeur of the historic buildings. The premium atmosphere, which relied so heavily on curation, elegance, and space, was suddenly suffocated by the aggressive, densely packed merchandising of a discount sports chain. Simultaneously, the true luxury element of the business was quietly siphoned off. Fraser's Group began funneling its most desirable, high-end designer menswear and womenswear into its separate, rapidly expanding flannels chain. House of Fraser was left stranded in an uncomfortable retail purgatory, no longer a luxury destination, yet too disjointed to be a dedicated discount warehouse. To walk through these surviving shops was a surreal, hollow experience. The tea rooms were closed, the escalators were frequently cordoned off, and the remaining staff looked adrift in a sea of mismatched, confusing merchandise. The soul of the historic business had been meticulously excised. Then came the final erasure. Recognizing that the House of Fraser name carried the heavy, toxic baggage of its prolonged decline, the new ownership initiated a quiet, systematic rebranding program. Across the United Kingdom, the heritage signage is steadily being pulled down from the masonry. In its place, a new, slick, hyper-modern concept, simply named Fraser's, is being rolled out. These new Fraser's stores are undeniably modern, heavily focused on luxury streetwear, premium cosmetics, and digital integration. They are efficient machines of modern retail, but they are completely devoid of the local history, the regional charm, and the generational warmth that the original empire was built upon. The name House of Fraser is slowly being relegated to a mere tab on a corporate website, a digital ghost of a bygone era. The stores that survived the administration of 2018 have not truly been saved. They have been absorbed, acting merely as physical vessels for an entirely different corporate entity. The aristocratic monarch of the British High Street is not entirely dead, but it has been transformed into a complete stranger, a mere shadow of the empire it once was. Across the United Kingdom, the ghosts of the House of Fraser Empire still loom over the High Street. In many provincial towns and cities, the massive Victorian and Edwardian buildings that once housed the regional aristocrats of retail now stand empty. These colossal structures, with their sweeping staircases and whitewashed windows, have become the white elephants of the modern commercial property market. They are too vast to be easily repurposed, too expensive to maintain, and too deeply woven into the local architecture to simply be demolished. They serve as silent, imposing monuments to a golden age of retail that has definitively vanished. But the true legacy of House of Fraser is not merely architectural, it is profoundly cultural. For over a century, these department stores were the beating heart of British civic life. They were the destination for Saturday afternoon family rituals, the trusted arbiters of middle-class taste, and the backdrop against which generations bought their school uniforms, their wedding dresses, and their Christmas presents. They provided a sense of occasion, a touch of everyday luxury that elevated the mundane chore of shopping into a highly anticipated social event. When the velvet ropes came down and the fragrance of the beauty halls faded, it was not just a commercial entity that disappeared. A vital, unifying piece of the local community's shared history was abruptly erased. The collapse of this 169-year-old dynasty offers a brutal, uncompromising lesson in modern commerce. House of Fraser proved that no amount of heritage, no matter how prestigious or beloved, can act as a shield against the future. The empire falsely believed its sprawling physical footprint and multi-generational brand loyalty made it invincible. Instead, those very assets became the heavy anchors that dragged it into the abyss. It was suffocated by leases it could no longer afford, hollowed out by the ruthless financial engineering of private equity, and fundamentally outpaced by a digital revolution it was far too arrogant and too slow to understand. Today, the British High Street is a leaner, faster, and arguably colder environment. The grand, theatrical era of the premium department store, with its deferential staff, clinking china in the tea rooms, and glittering mechanical window displays, belongs entirely to the past. The House of Fraser name may still flicker on a few modern shopfronts, or exist as a sterile logo on a smartphone screen, but the true empire, the one that once confidently dominated the British retail landscape, is gone. It survives only in the memories of those who remember what it felt like to step through those heavy glass doors and be transported, if only for an afternoon, into a world of absolute aspiration. The demise of House of Fraser is not simply the story of a mismanaged balance sheet, suffocating leases, or a failure to build a functional website. It is the story of the British High Street itself. It is a stark reminder that retail empires do not collapse overnight because of a single, isolated mistake. They fall through a slow, painful accumulation of arrogance, complacency, and a fatal belief that a glorious past will somehow protect them from a rapidly evolving future. For over a century, these grand department stores were the magnificent anchors of our town and city centers. They were not merely places of transaction, they were the physical architecture of our memories. They were the theater of the Saturday shopping trip, the magic of the illuminated Christmas windows, the pride of buying that first tailored suit or school uniform, and the comforting, multi-generational ritual of tea and scones on the top floor. When the velvet ropes were removed and the doors were padlocked for the last time across so many historic locations, what vanished was not just a retail brand, but a profound sense of community and civic identity. The British High Street has changed, perhaps irrevocably. The frictionless convenience of the internet and the aggressive efficiency of out-of-town retail parks have fundamentally redrawn the map of how we consume. A business must adapt to survive, but the ultimate tragedy of House of Fraser is that in its desperate, dying days, it was hollowed out by financial engineering and forgot what made it special in the first place. It traded its aristocratic heritage for a bargain bin, leaving behind empty Victorian and Edwardian palaces that now stand as silent, imposing memorials to a bygone era of premium shopping. We would love to hear your stories. Did you work at a House of Fraser, Beattie's, Dingles, Jenner's, or Army and Navy? Do you have fond memories of the beauty halls or the Christmas grottos? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if you want to explore more documentaries about the rise and fall of Britain's most iconic high street brands, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching.